Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. The situation remains relatively calm along the Indo-Pak border, but Indian forces on high alert. Prime Minister Modi meets Air Force personnel at Punjab's Adampur Airbase. Army sources say 3 Lashkar-e-Toiba terrorists were killed in an operation in J&K's Shopian. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh reviews the security situation at the border. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 that the DGMOs of both countries agree not to initiate any aggressive and inimical action against each other. Indian equities take a breather after Monday's breakthrough rally. Sensex and the Nifty dip around 1.5% each, but the mid-cap index continues to trade in the green. The rupee strengthens against the dollar but is off its early highs on dollar buying by importers. Cipla meets the street in Q4, net profit up 30% on a year-on-year basis. FY25 margins come in higher than the company's guidance, announces a total dividend of 16 rupees for shareholders. India warns the World Trade Organization that it is considering imposing retaliatory tariffs on certain steel and aluminum products imported from the US, says the move is aimed at countering the Trump administration's imposition of 25% levies on Indian imports, adding that America's measures would hurt $7.6 billion worth of Indian-made products imported to the US. Donald Trump signs an executive order that cuts prices of some medicines in the U.S. to align them to those paid in other developed countries. Trump says the order will apply to medicines procured via both commercial and public healthcare system, but does not disclose which exact medications the order will apply to. President Trump lands in Saudi Arabia in the first leg of his 3-day tour to the Middle East, holds talks with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, covers a range of issues including investments, defense, regional security and Riyadh's civil nuclear program. Trump will head to Qatar and the UAE next. Justice Sanjeev Khanna retires as the 51st Chief Justice of the Supreme Court after a brief tenure of just over 6 months. Justice B.R. Gawai to assume office of CJI tomorrow. For the top story this evening, the situation along the Indo-Pak border continues to remain relatively calm. However, Indian forces remain on high alert. Prime Minister Modi visited Punjab's Adampur Air Base, interacted with air warriors. Adampur is India's second largest air force base, and it was one of the military sites that Pakistan attempted to attack last week. Prime Minister Modi also shared pictures of him with a MiG-29 jet and an intact Russian S-400 air defense system in the background, once again debunking Pakistan's claim that the missiles from its JF-17 fighter jet caused heavy damage to the Adampur Air Base and destroyed the S-400. In an address to personnel at Adampur Air Base, Prime Minister Modi said that Operation Sindoor was the new normal, called the IAF's contribution unimaginable, exemplary and outstanding.
जब हमारी बहनों, बेटियों का सिंदूर छीना गया, तो हमने आतंकियों के फन को उनके घर में घुस के कुचल दिया। भारत माता की जय! भारत माता की जय! भारत माता की जय! वो कायरों की तरह छिप कर आए थे, लेकिन भूल गए उन्होंने जिसे ललकारा है वो हिंद की सेना है।
And the Prime Minister reiterating that Operation Sindoor is the new normal for India's stance on terrorism. In his address to the nation yesterday, he added that India will not tolerate any threats of nuclear action. He said, "We will not stand for nuclear blackmail by Pakistan." Sources have told CNBC-TV18 that the DG military operations of both sides, India and Pakistan, have agreed to not initiate any aggressive action. Not a single shot should be fired, and have also committed and agreed to an immediate reduction of troops from the forward areas as well as the border areas. Parikshit is standing by with more on the Prime Minister's visit to the Adampur Air Base, as well as the current state of play between India and Pakistan. A significant move there by the Prime Minister to visit the Adampur Air Base in Punjab, Parikshit, and, in many ways debunking Pakistan's claim of destroying the S-400 air defense system, of destroying the Adampur Air Base as well. The Prime Minister there speaking to the air warriors and making it clear that our position on Operation Sindoor is now the new normal.
Absolutely. Adampur Air Base in Punjab was one of the areas which reportedly came under fire from Pakistani forces, and this was India's message to the world and also Pakistan that you could not target, you could not cause any damage to the Adampur base or our S-400 air defense systems. It was to boost the morale of our armed forces, who played a critical role over the last 1 week or so. Also to send out a very strong message from an air base, from a military base, that this is now going to be the new normal. If there is going to be any attack from Pakistan, any terrorist attack from Pakistan, it will be treated as an act of war. Having said that, what's happening domestically? We've seen a massive counter-terrorism operation underway since the Pahalgam attack. This morning, at least 3 terrorists were killed in a counter-terrorism operation, and this was led by the police force in Jammu and Kashmir and the army as well. Domestically, we've not seen any ceasefire violation since about 11:30 p.m. last night. No drone sightings either, but before that there were drones spotted in different areas. So India is really keeping its guard up. Have the forces, has there been true production at the border? The answer is not immediately. It's going to take some time. There is a lack of trust between the two sides. Even though the DGMOs have decided to stop firing, pause military action for the moment, it will take some time to take shape of an actual ceasefire. For the moment, our operations, our operational deployments in the Arabian Sea with the Navy, with the Air Force and the Army are in the highest possible alert. This is not going to change. And we can also tell our viewers that the Parliamentary Committee on Foreign Affairs is going to hold a very important meeting on what's happened with India and Pakistan during Operation Sindoor, and Foreign Secretary will be briefing committee members on the 19th of May.
Parikshit, many thanks for joining us. And Prime Minister, during his address to the nation last evening, had also stressed that the time had come for greater reliance on made-in-India defence equipment. Now, Indian defence stocks surging, up 10% in today's trade on the back of that statement. Meanwhile, Chinese defence stocks were under selling pressure today. The Hang Seng China and Aerospace and Defence Index was down nearly 3%. Majority of the Chinese defence stocks traded with cuts of up to 7%. Now, as per the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, China accounted for 81% of Pakistan's arms imports between 2019 and 2023. On to the day's market action. Indian equities took a breather after Monday's breathtaking rally. The Sensex and the Nifty dipped around 1.5% each, but the mid-cap index continued to outperform. The Nifty Bank also witnessed some cuts, ending more than 440 points lower. Prashant joins us now to take us through the trading action. Prashant, so a little bit of a breather there. The market's giving up some of Monday's gains.
We gave back about 40-odd% of the gains, the big monster gains that we saw yesterday. The market in the Nifty ending about, 350 points lower. The Nifty Bank lesser, but about 0.75-odd% cut there. Nifty mid-cap and small-cap indices much better, and that is the reason why market breadth was a clean 2:1 in favour of advances. I'll start with, what was up today as far as the index is concerned. It was once again a defence kind of a day. Last week, remember, you had a day when the defence index was up 5. Guess what? Today was a big one as well. So in the Nifty, there was Bharat Electronics, which was the biggest gainer in that space. Apart from that, Jio Financial Services did very well. Hero MotoCorp reported numbers, market liked them. And the pharma pack, Dr. Reddy's was up. Sun and Cipla were higher, small up, but nothing major, but they were higher nevertheless. On the downside, IT was a clear loser. Infosys, HCL Tech were the two which kind of stood out. Power Grid, Eternal, which is Zomato, was lower. There was Hindalco and Bharti, which were the other names which were down as well. Broader space, lots of stuff which was up more than down. So again, a lot of defense here. Bharat Dynamics, Idea Forge, which two of those names which were up big with strong volumes. Tanla Solutions, Vishal Megamart. There was Care Ratings. Z was up as well. TD Power, Afcons, Suvain. Birla Corp was up about 5.5% by close. Schaeffler India, 6%. Edelweiss, 7%. Nippon India was up about 6%. I could go on. A fairly robust list of volume-led gainers coming in. On the downside, Swiggy, K Fintech, TCS, and SRF, PG Electroplast. These are, some of them are simply reversals of the very large gains that each of these individual stocks saw as part of what we had yesterday. So a pullback, absolutely. A meaningful one at that, perhaps, yes. But the environment, the mood generally with regards to global trade after the US-China deal remains much more constructive. Back to you.
Prashant, many thanks for joining us. That was the market action, but let's talk about the big macro data point out today. The retail inflation number for the month of April out. dropping to 3.16% in the month of April. That's the lowest since July of 2019. The fall in inflation was driven primarily by the fall in food and oil prices. So that's good news coming in on India's inflation front. We are continuing to see that drop as far as vegetable prices are concerned, and all of that boding well. We'll, of course, get you more details. The big earnings of the day, Hero Moto met expectations in Q4. Price hikes boosted margins and realizations. Revenue surpassed expectations, growing 4% compared to the last year, and net profit and EBITDA margins were in line with estimates. The company said it remains cautiously optimistic about its near to mid-term outlook. And more earnings. Pharma major Cipla's numbers largely in line with street estimates. Net profit ahead of estimates. Margins missed the mark. Net profit up more than 30%, while revenue rose 9.2% on an annual basis. The company's announced a total dividend of 16 rupees for shareholders. Shares of Paytm down 5% after 4.1% of its equity changed hands in a large block deal, something that we had reported here on CNBC-TV18. While details of the seller have not been disclosed, sources have told us that Chinese fintech giant Antfin is the likely seller. The firm has offloaded its stake for over 2,000 crore rupees. The floor price for the deal was reportedly set at around 810 rupees a share. And shares of K Fintech slumping in trade after Singapore-based promoter General Atlantic Fund sold around 10% stake for nearly 1,800 crore rupees. Shares changed hands in multiple block deals at an average price of 1,045 rupees a share. The floor price was at a discount of 8.3% to Monday's closing. With this, General Atlantic stake in K Fintech comes down to 22%. President Trump has signed an executive order that directs pharma companies to lower drug prices to align them with those paid in other developed countries. The order has given drug makers price targets in the next 30 days. President Trump has said that further action will be taken to lower prices if firms don't make significant progress towards those goals. The U.S. leader said that the order will apply to medicines procured via both commercial and the public healthcare system. However, he hasn't disclosed which medications are covered by the order. Speaking to journalists, Trump said that he was seeking cuts of between 59 and 90%.
We'll no longer tolerate profiteering and price gouging from Big Pharma, but again, it was really the countries that forced Big Pharma to do things that, frankly, I'm not sure they really felt comfortable doing, but they've gotten away with it, these countries. European Union has been brutal. Some prescription drug and pharmaceutical prices will be reduced almost immediately by 50 to 80 to 90%. Big Pharma will either abide by this principle voluntarily or will use the power of the federal government to ensure that we are paying the same price as other countries.
It is really the big pharma products, because if you know how the market is split, 80% of prescription drugs by volume only account for 20% of the value. And it's 20% of prescription drugs by volume account for 80% of value. And that's the 80% he wants to shrink.
The way I would put it is the final executive order, which we saw yesterday evening from the US president, it's a much diluted version of what he had put out in September 2020, which, as Mr. Vaidi said, eventually faced legal challenges and was withdrawn by the Biden administration. But the yesterday's version was much more diluted in a way that the focus is on patients who directly want to buy drugs from manufacturers. They will get the drugs at the most favored nation pricing.
And President Trump has commenced his first trip to the Middle East. His three-day tour will also include a visit to Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. This is his first official state visit of his second presidency. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman greeted Trump upon arrival in Riyadh. He was also accompanied by Tesla CEO Elon Musk, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, and OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. Trump will be expected to focus on securing major financial investments for the U.S. and having diplomatic talks on issues including a Gaza ceasefire. President Trump is hoping to secure a $1 trillion investment from Saudi Arabia, further boosting the Crown Prince's earlier investment pledge of $600 billion in the U.S. And India has warned the World Trade Organization that it is considering imposing retaliatory tariffs on certain steel and aluminum products imported from the U.S. India said that the move aims to counter the Trump administration's imposition of 25% levies on Indian imports. Manisha is standing by with more. Manisha, what does this mean now, the threat of India imposing retaliatory tariffs on U.S. steel and aluminum?
Well, yes, India has approached the World Trade Organization, and this is proposing to impose retaliatory tariffs on the tariffs from US on steel and aluminum. Well, this is expected to impact products worth $7.6 billion and a duty collection estimated at $1.91 billion as well. India has said, and it has said that it's keeping the options open when it comes to reviewing the list of products as well as adjusting rates as well. India also maintains that the measures taken by the US are not consistent with GATT. Also, India argues that the tariffs that have been put on India's steel and aluminum do not augur well and actually impact the industry in Indian markets itself. So when it comes to steel, well, India's steel industry has less dependent on the US markets there. When you look at the numbers 2023-24, US imported 0.1 million tons of steel from India, and this is out of nearly 145 million tons of steel that India produces. So that impact is not expected to be so much. But aluminum really is the major point here. US is the largest importer of aluminum in the world. US is the second largest international market for the Indian aluminum products, and India is also the second largest producer of aluminum in the international markets. So there are various important metrics coming in here. Now, when you look at the numbers as well, Indian export of aluminum products to US in 16-17 were at $350 million, which has increased to nearly $946 million US in the year 2023-24. In some years in between, we've seen $1 billion also being crossing in sense of numbers there. So this is where the pain point really is. And it's not just India. Canada and European Union also have complained to the WTO when it comes to tariffs on US steel and aluminum there. Now, this comes in at an interesting point because US and India are negotiating bilateral trade. There also are reports on how the Indian team is going to US in the coming week to talk further about this. So this happening at this point in time, clearly, as I said, comes at a very, very interesting time.
Manisha, many thanks. In international news, Israeli forces have bombed the Nasir medical complex in Gaza's Khan Yunis, killing 2 people. Several people have also been wounded, including patients and medical staff. Meanwhile, Hamas has freed an Israeli-American soldier, Edan Alexander, after the deal was brokered by the Trump administration. Ukraine has said that Russia has ignored calls for a 30-day ceasefire made over the weekend by the US and Europe. The pause in military action was due to begin yesterday. Ukrainian President Zelensky said that the Russian shelling and assaults continue. He added that Moscow has also remained silent about the proposal for a direct meeting between the two leaders in Istanbul. Ukraine's military has said that there had been 133 clashes with Russian forces along the front lines until last night. China will commit credit lines of under $10 billion to South American countries. The credit line will be denominated in the yuan. The country's President Xi Jinping made the announcement while addressing a summit of Latin American and Caribbean officials in Beijing. Xi also said that China will implement a visa-free policy for 5 Latin American and Caribbean countries. We will head into a break, but up next, Justice Sanjeev Khanna retires as the 51st Chief Justice of the Supreme Court after a brief tenure of just over 6 months. Justice Gavai to assume the office tomorrow. That and more when we return. The Supreme Court bid farewell to Chief Justice of India Sanjeev Khanna, who passes on the baton to Justice B.R. Gavai. Addressing a ceremonial bench on the day of his retirement, Chief Justice Khanna said, and I quote, "The public trust that the judiciary has cannot be commanded and has to be earned," end of quote. Ashmit joins us now to sum up the 6-month tenure, which, though brief, wasn't without tension. Ashmit.
Well, I met the CJI Justice Khanna over a cup of tea just a few days before his retirement. And as a curious journalist, I inquired about the investigation into cash at Justice Yashwant Verma's residence. His reply was curt but pointed. He said, "If there's any news coming from the Supreme Court, you can rest assured it's not from me." Words that symbolize his 6-month tenure at the helm of the Indian judiciary. Justice Sanjeev Khanna retires as India's 51st Chief Justice, having taken over the reins in November of 2024. He's had a brief tenure of just a little over 6 months. As he walks out of courtroom number 1 in Supreme Court, taking his seat as India's 52nd Chief Justice will be Justice Bhushan Ramakrishna Gavai. Now, for someone who followed the media blitz of former CJI Justice Chandrachud, Justice Khanna's tenure was unusually quiet, but quiet did not mean without tension. The biggest issue during his tenure was a situation almost out of a 90s Bollywood production. On the night of March 14th, a fire broke out at the residence of Delhi High Court Judge Justice Yashwant Verma. On reaching the location, fire marshals discovered gunny bags full of half-burnt cash. An unprecedented crisis, social media fury and public confidence at an all-time low in the judiciary. Now, to restore lost faith, CJI Khanna followed the mantra, sunlight is the best disinfectant. On March 22nd, in a first-of-its-kind move, CJI Khanna published all the details on the Supreme Court website. The website now had pictures and videos of the cash, reports by the Delhi police, as well as even reports by the Delhi High Court Chief Justice recommending a probe. Subsequently, CJI Khanna appointed a 3-judge inquiry committee which submitted its report within 45 days on May 5th. And by May 8th, Justice Khanna had already dispatched this report and Justice Verma's response to the President and to the Prime Minister. Now, here's what's interesting. As per the Supreme Court's in-house procedure, the CJI is required to refer the matter to the President and the Prime Minister only if the inquiry committee has found substance in allegations and has recommended his removal and the judge has refused to resign. CJI Khanna may have paved the way for a rare impeachment proceeding. Moving ahead, another key feature of his tenure will be the judges disclosing their assets to the public. In a first, on the 6th of May, 21 out of 33 judges disclosed their assets and investments on the Supreme Court website. That figure has now risen to as high as 24. This was seen as another step by Justice Khanna to restore confidence after the Justice Yashwant Verma episode. What makes this unique is that similar resolutions for sharing asset details were floated in 1997 and 2009, but most judges chose to avoid any disclosure or scrutiny. On the judicial side, CJI Khanna left his mark on the Waqf case. In a power move, the centre passed the Waqf Act with much fanfare. CJI Khanna, however, stood in the way. He expressed concerns about non-Muslims in Waqf boards and Waqf Council. He also questioned the government on change of status of existing Waqf properties. Now, Justice Khanna had proposed a stay of this new act. Alarmed, the centre undertook that under this new act, no new appointments will be made and status of Waqf properties will not be changed. Justice Khanna also brought an end, at least for now, to the politics of Mandir Masjid. A spurt of cases and trial court orders directing surveys of mosques and dargahs for remnants of temples had led to religious tensions and violence. On December 12th, Justice Khanna passed orders barring any fresh suits for religious sites and stayed trial courts from passing orders directing surveys. Now, even before he became the Chief Justice of India, he had left his imprint on several key cases. Now, he's ruled that CJIs were subject to the RTI. In a landmark case, he was a part of a 5-judge bench that abrogated Article 370. Last year, he was part of another landmark 5-judge bench that struck down electoral bonds as illegal. Interestingly, he also granted bail to Arvind Kejriwal in an ED case to let him campaign during the Lok Sabha elections of 2024. Now, Justice Khanna has tried to play it by the book as a judge and as an administrator. But with cases like challenges to the UAPA, the PMLA and the CAA still pending, some are asking if, despite his brief stint, he could have done more.
Ashmit, many thanks for joining us. Change of guard there at the Supreme Court. Now, at least 15 people have died and several others remain hospitalized in Amritsar district after consuming illicit liquor. The victims belong to 5 villages, including Bhangli, Patalpuri and Therwal, and are believed to have purchased liquor from the same supplier. Authorities fear the number could go up as signs of toxic alcohol can take 48 hours to manifest. The Mahila court in Tamil Nadu's Coimbatore has convicted 9 men 6 years after they were accused of sexually assaulting at least 8 women and blackmailing them. The judge ordered life sentences for all 9 convicts found to be guilty of gang rape. The accused have been in the Salem Central Prison since 2019. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC-TV18. Stay tuned. We're back in a minute with more.